the United States has dramatically seized 2 more sanctioned oil tankers in a move that has been condemned by Russia. One of the tankers was Russian-flagged and had been pursued for more than 2 weeks across the Atlantic by the US. The Ministry of Defence has confirmed that British forces were involved in the operation to seize the Marinera in a support role. Washington says the tanker is part of a so-called shadow fleet that carries oil for countries like Venezuela, Russia and Iran in violation of US sanctions. Our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale has been following the story.
These are the images from the US Coast Guard in hot pursuit of the Russian-flagged tanker in the North Atlantic, just before US Special Forces boarded and seized the vessel. And this the view from the tanker trying to evade capture, provided to a Russian state broadcaster. RT also later released stills of US Special Forces helicopters arriving to carry out the raid.
The vessel this morning was seized in the North Atlantic pursuant to a warrant issued by a U.S. federal court after being tracked. And this was a Venezuelan shadow fleet vessel that has transported sanctioned oil. And the United States of America, under this president, is not going to tolerate that.
And Britain was involved. In recent days, there had been a significant US military build-up at RAF bases in the UK, with the arrival of around a dozen aircraft. Today, the Ministry of Defence confirmed it helped the US with its own surveillance flights and a Royal Navy support ship. The US has been tracking this tanker, originally called Bella 1, for some time. It believed it had been illegally shipping Iranian oil. The tanker was docked in Iran last August. In November, it made the long voyage west towards Venezuela. In December, it reached the Caribbean, where the US Coast Guard first tried to board the vessel. The tanker then dramatically changed course. While being chased, it stopped transmitting its location. It also changed its name from Bella 1 to Marinera and re-registered as a Russian-flagged vessel. Its most recent position was here in the North Atlantic, between Iceland and the UK. This is where the US Coast Guard, working alongside US Special Forces, successfully boarded the tanker. Washington had ignored Moscow's request to leave their ship alone.
This is part of a maximum pressure campaign against Venezuela to control the flow of their oil. But it sends a strong signal to everyone involved in the use of shadow fleet shipping to distribute their fossil fuels illegally. And that's Venezuela, Iran, and Russia.
It's not the first time, and it won't be the last. Earlier today, US forces raided another tanker in the Caribbean. Proof that President Trump is prepared to use force, especially when it comes to protecting America's economic interests. Jonathan Beale, BBC News.
We'll hear from our political editor, Chris Mason, in a moment about British involvement. But first, let's talk to our North America editor, Sarah Smith, in Washington. And what does this tell us about US policy now?
Well, I think it shows you how emboldened the Trump administration feels since the success of that military operation in Venezuela. And it shows you just how determined the administration is to pursue its aims, unafraid to use the armed forces to do so, and to do so right across the globe, even when it means potentially risking conflict with a relatively more powerful neighbour like Russia. I think the Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth, summed it up today when he said, when the president speaks, he means it. He's not messing around. That's what this was a very able demonstration of today. And I think the other thing it showed us is just how determined Donald Trump is to take control of and profit from Venezuelan oil, because it's not just the oil on that tanker, the Sophia, and another one which was captured at the end of last year. There is also the fact that he has announced 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil will be coming to him to be controlled by him, and US oil companies are being invited here to the White House on Friday to discuss how they can exploit Venezuelan oil reserves.
And Chris Mason, in Westminster, what we learned this afternoon was that British forces were involved in this, albeit in a support role.
Indeed so. You know, if the headlines of the last few days have been eye-grabbing and attention-grabbing but have felt some distance away, well, today, not a bit of it. It happening very close to the UK, and as you say, involving the UK in a support role. This was happening at around about lunchtime. The UK had been aware that it would happen for around about a week, with America requesting permission to base aircraft here, but also the UK being involved, the Navy and the Air Force. The argument that is made within government is that this is something of a no-brainer. And when you look at the countries with which this ship in the North Atlantic had been associated, Venezuela, but in particular Iran and Russia, it is something of an assembly of adversaries of the US and the UK. I'm struck by the language from the Ministry of Defence tonight, describing this ship as nefarious, which is military speak for dodgy. Now, the argument that is made politically here is that this is what the UK-US relationship looks like. Yes, it can have tensions, not least Greenland at the moment, but it can also be mutually beneficial.